Italian immigrants, like many immigrants from Southern and Eastern Europe, came to this country and got semi-skilled or unskilled industrial jobs. They're the ones who are working in the steel mills, working in heavy industry. They were often jobs that were extremely dangerous. Something along the lines of 35,000 people a year were either killed or maimed by industrial accidents. So it was an extremely dangerous place to work.
The Italian was looked upon as some kind of an inferior being, and there's no question about it. There were many instances of downright, blatant, ugly prejudices shown the Italians. They were called all kinds of names, and the attitude was, these people are different from us, and therefore, because they're different from us, we don't like them.
Life for Italian immigrants was very difficult. They are coming in on the bottom rung of the economic ladder. They are viewed largely with contempt and disdain. So fitting in, acclimating into American society was very difficult. I mean, the terms Guinea, Wop, Dago, they don't appear out of nowhere. This is a reflection of the contempt with which they were viewed by mainstream.
Some people think anarchists are just wild-eyed, crazy bomb throwers. But most anarchists are not bomb throwers. Most anarchists have a kind of philosophy about what society should be like. And Sacco and Vanzetti subscribe to this philosophy. They believe that the economic resources of society should be collectively owned and distributed in an equitable way so that everybody could have a job and everybody could have all the necessities of life. They were opposed to government, to the state. They felt that the state was oppressive. They felt that the state was on the side of the rich.
There's an attempted robbery in Bridgewater on Christmas Eve in 1919. There's a robbery in South Braintree in April of 1920, and there's a local police chief in Bridgewater, Michael Stewart, who makes an attempt to put these robberies together with his pursuit of Reds and radicals. He's a local arm of the Red Scare, essentially. He's on the trail of a Gallianista named Kawachi, who was scheduled for deportation. He was actually scheduled to be deported the day of the South Braintree robbery. And Stewart shows up at his house, and Kawachi looks suspicious to him. He has a roommate named Boda, actually Maria Buda, who has a car that's being repaired at a local shop. And Stewart decides that he's happened upon the men who are responsible for the robberies. 4 men show up to pick up the car in May of 1920, Mario Buda, Orciani, and Sacco and Vanzetti. And the only 2 who are picked up are Sacco and Vanzetti. They're picked up in a streetcar on their way home.
It was discovered each was armed, and the policeman was quite suspicious of that. He was afraid they were making false moves. In any case, Sacco was discovered to have a loaded pistol with 23 extra bullets. Vanzetti had a revolver with no extra bullets, although it was fully loaded, but with some shotgun shells, which is also very, very suspicious. And with that, Sacco and Vanzetti had to face
of the arrest. They didn't really understand what they were being accused of. They're being accused of murder, but they didn't know what it was all about.
When they are arrested, they are not told the reason why they have been apprehended. All they say is suspicious characters. Their immediate assumption is that they have been grabbed because they're radicals.
Here's a sample of the interrogation. Interrogating Sacco. Police, are you a citizen? Sacco, no. Police, are you a communist? Sacco, no. Police, anarchist? Sacco, no. He's lying. Why would an anarchist lie to a policeman?
To the South Braintree robbery and murder. In the absence of any strong case against him, the best way they could get a conviction was to try him first in connection with his botched robbery in Bridgewater.
The Bridgewater crime had occurred on December 24th, 1919. It was another attempted payroll robbery in which several armed men tried to stop a payroll truck in the street. One of them fired a couple of shotgun shells. Basically, the truck simply managed to drive away and the men fled.
There's very little evidence in this trial against Vanzetti. He has a very distinctive handlebar mustache, and it's very difficult to find witnesses who will testify that they saw him. And in fact, His defense attorney is able to put over a dozen witnesses on the stand testifying that they saw Vanzetti on the day of the robbery. On Christmas Eve, Italian families traditionally eat eels. Vanzetti is a fish seller. He spent all day on Christmas Eve selling eels to the Italian families in his neighborhood. So something like 13 or 14 different people testified that they either bought eels from Vanzetti that day, or in the case of Beltrando Brini, testified that he sold eels with Vanzetti all day that day. All of the witnesses who are testifying on Vanzetti's behalf speak Italian. They all need translators, and the prosecutor, Frederick Katzman, just dismantles them on the stand.
These eyewitnesses were simply ruled unreliable. And why? Because they were Italians. They were, how could you believe an Italian testifying about an Italian? You can only believe an Anglo-Saxon testifying about an Italian, especially when you're talking to an all-Anglo-Saxon jury and an Anglo-Saxon judge.
The presiding judge in the trial for the Bridgewater botched holdup was Judge Webster Thayer. Vanzetti, at one point, referred to Webster Thayer as a cobra and a black frock. That about sums it up. He detested foreigners, had an absolutely pathological hatred of radicals, and perceived himself as a kind of St. George who was going to battle the Red Dragon. There was no possibility of this man conducting himself in an impartial manner.
And he convicted or sentenced Vanzetti just for the attempted robbery. And the sentence was something along the lines of 15 years, which was just an unheard of sentence for someone who'd never been arrested, much less convicted of a crime.
The Bridgewater conviction certainly persuaded Katzman, I think, that he might get a murder conviction as well in the South Braintree trial. And now that Vanzetti was branded a guilty man, that was going to help too.
Are they guilty or are they innocent? But in this justice system, as we've constructed it, the important issue is, are they innocent until proven guilty? And in this case, clearly they were not.
In July of this year, two bandits, Sacco and Vanzetti, were convicted of murder in the first degree by a jury of the Norfolk County Court. Their trial was entirely fair. The presiding judge specially cautioned the jury not to allow the fact that the defendants are Italians to influence you or prejudice you in the least degree. In short, every right was granted to the defendants. But Sacco and Vanzetti belong to a sacred class. They are communists. All over Europe, apparently, the various congeners of the Bolsheviki are going to howl against a fictitious injustice. At least their sentimental sympathizers in this country might be awakened into common sense. Or do they really wish that a person clothed with the sublime character of a communist, an anarchist, or even a socialist shall be exempt from the jurisdiction of the criminal courts? The New York Times.
I think it's important to remember this case because of what it suggests about the United States. We pride ourselves on being a nation of immigrants, on the American dream, being available to everyone who comes here and wants to pursue it. And there are moments where we don't live up to that ideal. There are moments where we fail. And I think if we forget our failures, then we're in serious trouble.
I think one of the reasons that the case has lasting meaning is because it speaks to issues that remain alive today.
The Department of Justice is waging a deliberate campaign of arrest and detention to protect American lives.
Critics still say the Department of Justice is casting too wide a net, trampling on civil liberties to ensure safety.
Unfortunately, in the American justice system, who you are and what you believe has enormous importance, especially during periods of perceived crisis or real crisis. This is a nation that's often poised to overreact. It's tragic, but it's true. Who you are matters in this country in terms of what sort of justice you'll receive.
Well, it sort of gets into the guts of American society. It exposes realities that many people would like to forget. This is a case which is about political intolerance. This is a question about racial prejudice. It demonstrates aspects of American society that then and now still persist. If you espouse the wrong political views, if you are not a conformist, the chances of you getting a fair trial are substantially diminished. And if Italians are no longer looked upon with the disdain and contempt they were in 1920, they've been replaced by other ethnic groups.
You know, the case resonates with me so deeply because it is so inspiring to see these two men and how they bear themselves in a situation where they have been so cruelly dealt with, how they maintain their dignity and how they maintain their ideas. And it brings to light so much about America, about patriotism, about what it really is and what it shouldn't be, and the need for a new society in which the existence of men like Sacco and Vanzetti and their dream of a truly democratic, egalitarian society remains alive.